Well, you mentioned a moment ago there are more than 100 million homeless people in the world, but the number of people with shabby housing is 10 times higher than that. The nonprofit organization Habitat for Humanity estimates there are some 1.6 billion people with inadequate shelter. In fact, 1 in 4 people on the planet live in conditions that are harmful to their health and/or their safety. Within the next 15 years, Habitat estimates 3 billion more people will need access to housing. And even for the world's largest economy, the United States, 1/3 of all homeless people are children. Some governments believe it's their responsibility to combat homelessness. Others prefer organizations to take the lead role. I talked about that with Marybeth Shinn. She's a professor of human and organizational development at Vanderbilt University. She says no matter what the approach, there's one common theme: a lack of funding.
That's hard everywhere. Whether it's funded through taxes or whether it's funded through charitable donations, there's never enough money to really solve the problem.
Social media for social good, that's the story that Mark New did. And it's interesting, I interviewed Nigel Skeet a while back, who's spent years photographing rock and roll stars, and he passed by a number of homeless people and then decided one day he was going to make them homeless rock stars, and started this project where he would bring them in, they get makeup and hair, and they were treated like rock stars. And he said you could see with their self-esteem how it started to come up. Talk to me about different methods. Are there innovative approaches out there to try and touch these people and move them along in their lives?
The most important thing you can do for folks who are homeless is get them housing. So if you're looking at families, which are about 1/3 of the problem in the United States, affordable housing, housing vouchers, housing subsidies really do the trick. If you're talking about people with chronic mental illnesses, which are a much smaller group, housing along with supported services that are under people's control, and housing without barriers so that people can come indoors first and deal with problems later seem to do the trick. For single adults who don't have other kinds of problems, sometimes a very short-term subsidy, sometimes called rapid rehousing, can get people back into mainstream housing and put them in a position to take care of the other issues in their lives, to get jobs. It's very hard to get a job while you're out on the streets.
Stereotypes that we see, what's the reality, and what would you like stripped away in terms of stereotypes?
Our stereotypes are the, sort of older male drunk. The age at which you're most likely to be in a homeless shelter in the United States is infancy. And rates stay higher for preschool kids than they are for adults. They're more adults because 0 to 5 is a pretty short span, and 20 to 50 is a much bigger span. But actually, the age at highest risk is infancy.
Let me ask you about Medicine Hat, Canada, this town that's pretty much effectively eliminated homelessness. They went with a housing first policy there in Canada, really stepping up to the plate on this issue. Do you see that elsewhere? Does there need to be more of an initiative on the part of leaders? And how do you get them interested in this issue and moving on it?
Well, Housing First, the Pathways to Housing version of Housing First was actually pioneered in New York City. And that was a program that gave people with serious mental illnesses and long histories of homelessness access to housing with private landlords without any prerequisites for sobriety or participation in treatment. Bottom line, compared to the usual services first approach, was 99 fewer days homeless in the first year. And so then, for a long time, there wasn't a whole lot of additional research. Then Canada, the Mental Health Board of Canada, did a 5-city trial, and again found overwhelming results of this housing first approach. So now everybody says what they're doing is housing first, whether it resembles that additional model or not.
Marybeth, what about bringing people together from all walks to come up with some kind of consensus? If this model works, is there that mechanism there to bring leaders together to actually try and address this, not just here in the United States, but elsewhere?
Well, I think there's a growing consensus among people who study the issue that this is the way to go, and it's spreading in Europe as well as in the United States. But it's basically a housing affordability problem, and that's a problem of income inequality, and those are challenges that not everyone is willing to face up to or do something about.
Marybeth Shinn, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.